Hello, everybody. Once again, I'm Liam Craft Jr., aka Zorwatch on the Less Than Guru, and in today's episode of tips and tricks that you might want to at least think about in your Palladium first edition games is how you deal with what in Palladium they call superior weapons. So there is a page 50 in the core book about superior weapons on having kobold and dwarven made weapons, and how as a character could go to, say, a kobold or a dwarf blacksmith, weaponsmith, and you could pay additional money to have a weapon made that gives you bonuses. And they have a breakdown on bladed weapons, pole arms, blunt weapons, we can see here. And the dwarven can get higher bonuses, and they cost more because they're just considered superior. So this is something that I personally like about Palladium, but there's a couple of things that you will need to think about in the game. And one is how you would not want kobold dwarven manufactured weapons to overtake, say, magical weapons or holy weapons, things like that. So this chart has basically, like, if I wanted to buy a pole arm that was a +1 damage, I would add 300% to the cost. So in this case, just to have a nice round number, we'll say that if it costs 100 gold, then you add 300% to that. So 300% is a multiplication of 3. So 100 times 3 is 300, and that is an additional you add to it. So that pole arm that is a +1 to damage is going to be 400 gold. Okay, so that's kind of the base thing. Then if we look at magical holy weapons, this is in the alchemist section. When you go through magic weapon properties, none of these are bonuses or real bonuses, except for this eternally sharp blade is a +3 to damage and costs 26,000 gold. There would be no reason to have an eternally sharp blade when you could buy a sword, either kobold or dwarven made blade weapon, +3 is at 400%. That's a lot less than 26,000 gold. Or if you wanted to do it +3, 400%, you could even get a +4%. And depending on the weapon, you can get up to like +6 damage and things like that. So it's something that I did not want in my game for the mundane, what I call mundane means non-mystical weapons, to be more attractive to a player and cheaper. If it's one of those where magic things might affect ethereal or ghost, or things can only be hit by magical weapons, then maybe this +3, but still for the most things out there, the +6 damage, the +5 damage for a ton less money is going to be a better deal. And then something that I also add, because again, beg, borrow, steal from other games, especially if they kind of capture your imagination, Yinsloth Jungle adds the blacksmith skill. So blacksmith is basically, in this, a character is considered an assistant blacksmith capable of repairing simple metal items, shoeing horses. But basically it just says metal armor can have up to 20 SDC repaired, which, if we look at the main book again for repairing damage things, are adding more to it. You can do more than 20. And the base point that I want to pull up is some characters take great pride, or some players like their character to have great pride, and it could be an in-character pride, it could be an out-of-character pride, it could be a combination of both, of creating their own weapons. And there lies a problem where a player can have a concept, they can get the skill, they can buy all the materials for it, and they will never get something as good as what somebody else could just buy from a dwarf or a kobold. So one of those things is also in another game, Earth Dawn, I have a character that's a weaponsmith, and I really like the idea of my character being able to make their own weapon, to improve their own weapon, and I wanted that to be expressed in my Palladium First Edition game. And we actually do have a player who is playing a cleric of my my crafting god, a dwarven crafting god, Phosis, who wishes to craft his own armor and weapons, and that makes absolute sense. So I've kind of rearrange things in my own game to where I have what I call exceptional products. And I have the kobold made weapons, I have dwarven made weapons, I also have elven made weapons for bows, and leather armor, light armor, and Gelfkin, which is my version of halflings gnomes, but I have them more considered like a Waro, or from Dennis Elmer Kiernan's Mythgar setting, which they are like the best bowmen. They're even better than elves, as well as something similar to gelflings from the Dark Crystal. So that's kind of my small halfling species instead of having halflings or gnomes. So in this, I wanted a player character to have the ability to do well. I wanted the other player characters to have the opportunity to buy things, but I didn't want it to be an outright buying, so that they could always just come across a good haul, a good treasure, a good loot, and then all of a sudden, boom, they have something better than anybody else could make through their character. So what I did is I gave maximums, and then I take the percentage, and again, I use the skills where if it's non-stressful, you get a 10% bonus. If you double the time, you get a plus 5%, and you can keep adding that time up to 5 complete times to get a plus 20%. So if you're in a non-stressful situation and you take a lot of time, you can get a 30% skill increase. For every 10% or 5, depending on what it is, that a character rolls under it, so kind of levels of success, if you want to consider that way, basically they can add to it. So such here, for a weapon, every 10% check that is successful, you can add a +1 to either the strike, the parry, the damage, those bonuses that you normally would get. And in that case, what I do for the buying is I will give the NPC blacksmith a roll, and they'll say, okay, I'm a dwarf, you're going to pay me this much money to be a dwarf. If you want me to spend extra time, it's going to increase the money, because now I'm spending more time building a weapon, crafting that weapon. And it's not a guarantee, but they'll get percentages, and then you tell me where you want those bonuses. So give me kind of your list: strike, parry, dodge. What do you want added to it? And I will be able, if I get higher as a game master, then I can add those to it. That also allows the player character to get the same thing. And if they're a dwarf, if they're a kobold, for my range and light armor, if they're an elf, if they want to be the best bow maker ever, then they can be a Gelfkin, and that will give them possibility of getting a greater bonus. But I just have it work that way, which is for every 10%, you can add a +1 up to the maximum. That way, players can just outright buy things, but it's not always known, and a player character who wants to be a blacksmith or a good Fletcher or a bow maker, which I can't, bowyer, I can't remember the term for a maker of bows, so forgive me for that. But they can do it, and they can provide the same. They have the potential to provide the same bonuses. You can do this very simple, as just a every 10%, you determine it. You look at the Palladium main book and you allow them to get up to these type of bonuses. Or you could do it like me, is you have a maximum. I get really detailed in it because that's something that I enjoyed as a player, is having a character that would get the materials and do this. So I even have like, if you want to make a sword, this is how much materials are required and the time required. You don't have to do that as a game master. You could just say, give me time, and for material, we'll take the finished product and it'll be half if you do it yourself, or 75% cost to buy the raw materials, whatever you would decide as a game master. But you then allow the player character to make the weapon. I also do it, the clerics. Like I said, I have a cleric, a player who has a cleric player character who worships the deity of craftsmanship. By doing that, then I get to choose, could that be a divine weapon that they do, or divine armor, and give some divine bonuses. Allow it to also hit those creatures that can only be hit by magical, or like a vampire or a werewolf that magic weapons will affect, where a normal mundane weapon will not affect, and give them that little incentive for it as well. And then you can do a lot of mixing matches with NPCs, giving bonuses and making magical weapons. And it doesn't always have to be alchemist. You can have your diabolist or symbologist. That's what I have, diabolist / summoner class. You could have them because they're making the physical stuff. They etch the runes, and it might not be exactly like rune weapons, but it could have symbols on it, and you just give them a way to make magical weapons. And then that makes the occupational character class even a little more tempting to play, because I get a lot of people who love the concept of a diabolist, and it's not a class that I've seen a lot of people take, if any, because it's a slow burn. You have to have the materials, you have to have the components. It takes time in that. And this would give a reason for a player to choose one of those characters. Hey, it might take me a long time to make wards, ward phrases, or do symbols and things like that, but I could provide weapons and armor of a magical value to my friends in the game. So it's just something that I wanted to bring up, is a Palladium has this base cost, but you might want to look at, if you have players that want to have a craftsman type character, don't shortchange them. They are spending time and resources. You only get a certain amount of secondary elective skills, to let them use those skills in the game. And it could be hey, we have some downtime. And if you don't like downtime, you can just hand wave it. X many weeks is going to take this, is going to take this much money, roll. Or if you like that nitty gritty, which I like, you can get into that nitty gritty of, okay, this is going to take you this many hours. Now you're going to have to multiply it if you want extra chance of getting bonuses and things like that. So there's a whole spectrum, a whole range along the line of how long and difficult you wish it to be as a game master mechanically. But in any of that, you could allow that to happen in your game. So having said that, hopefully that makes some sense. And I do recommend, especially if you have those players that like that idea of becoming a blacksmith as part of their character concept, to let them go with it, to encourage that creativity, and then they can get a character that is just like, I made my own stuff, and it just feels so cool to be able to do that in a game that normally wouldn't allow it. So having said that, once again, I'm William Craft Engineer, aka Zorvil Channel Less Than Guru, and until next time, I will catch you later.